Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Rita. Okay, it is 2 o'clock. Just before we get started, to let everyone know, this is a recorded training. So if you have to leave early, or if you know that there's someone else that's supposed to be here who's not here on time, it's recorded, and we always send out the recordings to everyone who registers to the webinar. Oh, it's Friday at 7 o'clock in the UK. Thank you so much for joining. We're over here in the East Coast. I think that's a good introduction to myself. I appreciate everyone joining today to talk about Google Analytics 4, GA4. If you attended our first session, this is very much so going to feel like a follow-up to that session. So this is a Beyond the Basics education series. And today's focus is going to be on intermediate navigation and event tracking. But before I dive into that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. As I just noted, we're on the East Coast in the US. My name is Sarah. I am the head of strategy and training at Cause Inspired. We are a full service digital marketing agency, and we specialize in something called the Google Ad Grant. So we mostly work with nonprofits using the Google Ad Grant, which is up to $10,000 a month of free ad spend for nonprofits. And with that ad spend, we're able to help nonprofits achieve their goals, drive more volunteers, donations, registrations, all of that good stuff. But we are a full service digital marketing agency, and my title specifically, I like to do the enterprise level account management. So I manage all different types of ads, from Google, display, paid search, to Facebook, LinkedIn, all that good stuff. And yes, Dean brings up a really good question in the chat. If you do have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. I will have some time, hopefully at the end of the session. I'm always happy to stay a little bit later too, to answer any questions that you might have. I just might not get to it right away. Okay, and then there's one other thing I want to let you know, which is that I've helped a lot of nonprofits specifically navigate Google Analytics over the years. If you don't work for a nonprofit, that's still a-okay. This is a session that's open to anyone, but I feel like it's important for me to note, because a part of the way that I like to teach and explain things is very nonprofit friendly. For those of you who don't know, nonprofits tend to wear many different hats. So someone who's working for a nonprofit might be managing their marketing, might also be managing their communications team. And because of that, there's not always a lot of room to learn every single little detail of a platform. So a lot of the times when I'm explaining things, I like to take it from that basics perspective. And while this is a Beyond the Basics training, we are still going to be reviewing a lot of those items. So if something is too jargony for you, or if it doesn't make sense, please feel free to type it in the chat. And like I said, at the end of the presentation, I am more than happy to dive into any questions you might have. All right, and that being said, let's go ahead and look at our session agenda for today. So we have 3 sections that we're going to be going over. The first is a review of navigation. As I noted, we did have an education series presentation last quarter where we did an introduction to GA4. And that series was 100% dedicated to how to navigate it. In this presentation, we are going to review some aspects of that navigation, but for the most part, I'm going to touch on just a couple of the areas where I find my clients and folks that I work with have the most questions. So that's going to be a review of the traffic and user acquisition. That's also going to be a review of page performance. So how to find your page performance, user details, how to enable your user details. I noticed that a lot of folks don't know how to set up Google Signals, so we'll be going over that today. I will also talk about the changes in the admin section. For those of you who are in GA4 often, or at least once in the past 3 months, you'll notice that they have added a lot to admin and they've kind of moved around the navigation a bit, so that will be important. After that, we're going to spend the majority of our conversation on events and conversions. So we're going to be talking about event management inside of GA4. What are events? How do you use the engagement overview section? How do you use the built-in events? And then most importantly, from my perspective, is how do you build out those custom definitions ahead of the GA4 switch in July? And then finally, we'll be wrapping it up with an overview of conversions. I'm going to go over the different types of conversions that are available within GA4. I'll be discussing how to create custom conversions and then ultimately how I would recommend you use those conversions. And then also before I dive in, I'll let you know that this presentation is going to involve a lot of live navigation inside of a GA4. We're using our personal GA4 for Cause Inspired, so there might not be like a lot of e-commerce data in there because we do not do online e-commerce. So that is just a bit of an explanation ahead of time as we're kind of venturing into some of these platforms. And on that note, let's go ahead and dive into reviewing some navigation. So when it comes to traffic and user acquisition, the two most common questions that I get are typically one, what channels are driving the most traffic to my website? And two, how are users getting to my website? They feel very similar, but they're very different answers. There's many different ways that you can use acquisition inside of GA4. One of the best ways is to use it to measure a user's experience on your website. Another way is to decide which channel is worth investing in. So if you see like your email traffic has tons of really good users coming to the site for the first time, but it never brings in return users, then you might be doing something wrong with your emails. That could be an opportunity to look into investing in a different email platform or perhaps refocusing that spend into a paid ads platform. And then another way I often like to use acquisition is to report to my team or typically my client on their overall website performance details. But like I said, there's two ways to view acquisition, and that is from the traffic perspective and from the user perspective. So let's go ahead and check that out here. So this is the inside of GA4, and this is the interface for GA4. On the left-hand side here, what you're going to do is you're going to select reports, and it might take a second to load. There we go. Under the life cycle section, you're going to see an option for acquisition. You'll select acquisition, and then there are those two options. And I mentioned they're a little different, so I'm going to walk you through that. The first one here for user acquisition, this is going to default to only showing you data on new users. So you can use this to investigate if you've got a traffic channel that's really good at driving first-time users to your site. And then the second option here is going to look at your users as a whole. So traffic acquisition is going to show you data for all users, return, new. They could have gone to the site multiple times within a day, within a week, or a month. And that's really good when you're looking to make decisions on just how a channel performs in general. I'm going to first check out traffic acquisition for you here. And you'll see when I click in, it's going to pull up this pretty line chart and then a graph here to the right. But really where the gold is this table down here in the bottom. And this is going to let you know how many total users were brought to your site within your date range and which traffic channel they are coming from. Just as a reminder, whenever you're looking at this data, you can always alter your date range in the top right-hand corner. You might be comfortable with last 28 days. I like to look at last 30 days pretty often, so I'm going to apply that. And here we can see that organic search, which is when folks search directly into Google or Bing, and they find your organic search listing there, is our top performing channel. You can also see some interesting metrics that come along with this. So how many sessions did each user have? How many of those sessions were engaged sessions? What is the amount of time that they were engaged on the website? And then we've also kind of got GA4's replacement for bounce rate here, which is engagement rate. And this would be the rate at which a user went to your website, was actually engaged with your content. So you can treat that kind of like bounce rate, although it is measured just a little bit differently. Now, one thing that I find not a lot of people know is that you can actually take this a step further. And right here, there is a drop-down option for how you're viewing your session data. And yeah, we can look at it from the default channel grouping like this, but you can also change this to view source medium if you're looking for a deeper dive on the exact source and then the exact medium that brought a user there. Earlier, I mentioned that, we were getting a lot of traffic from organic search. But how much of that is from Google and how much of that is from Bing? That can really answer that question. So we can see here that we've got traffic coming from Google Organic, and then we also have traffic coming from Bing Organic. Google CPC is, of course, our Google cost per click. That's our paid ads account, and so on and so forth. If I go into the user acquisition section, it's a very, very similar setup. The only difference is that this is only going to show me data on new users to the site. Very helpful for whenever you're looking to see which platforms are bringing in that, that new session, that new user. But it's kind of difficult to make a big decision here if you're like an e-commerce platform or someone who does expect to have a lot of return traffic over time. But same setup here. You can also click that drop down and check it out by source medium, or if you have an ads account integrated to your GA4, which we'll talk about, you can also view it that way as well. Awesome. And I'm going to go ahead and grab back up my presentation here. Perfect. Okay. So that is the acquisition section, but next we're going to be talking a little bit more about page performance. So the three most common questions that I get when talking about page performance are typically, one, where is it in GA4? Two, how can I view my page performance by page path instead of page title? And then three, is there a way that you can view the specific performance of a page per which channel is driving traffic there? And this is all going to go back to what we were just reviewing. So let me go ahead and pop back into GA4. And just as we were on this left-hand section here, now we're going to actually hop down to the engagement area. And in the engagement section, we're going to see pages and screens, and that is where you're getting all of your page data. The default in GA4 is to show you data on your page titles. This is my opinion, you know, so take it for what it's worth, but page titles are very confusing to me. Oftentimes because of like social card plugins that you might be using. Maybe you have spent a lot of time thinking about your page titles, or maybe you might have some page titles that feel very similar. So an easy way to view this data by page path instead of title is by clicking this drop down once again right here. And you're going to see that you have the option to view page path and screen class. Just makes it so much easier. So now that I can actually view my page performance by path, I can kind of start to dive a little bit deeper and answer that question of how do I add on more information to this? How do I investigate deeper? So let's say you and your team, or maybe to a group of stakeholders, they really want you to be able to report on the performance of a specific page. Let's just say it's this Google Ad Grants page for us. What I'm going to do is the first thing is I'm going to single out Google Ad Grants in the search bar, and I'm going to just type it in. And then I'm going to hit enter. When I hit enter, it's going to pull it up solo, and it might also pull up any pages that are very similar to it or that have a similar URL structure. And now I'm going to add on a secondary dimension. And you can add on a secondary dimension by selecting the plus sign right here. And then by going to any of these options, depending on what you want to see. For my example, I'm using traffic source, so I'm going to select traffic source. And now there are a lot of options here, but a good default to go to is probably session default channel group. And that will let you know the amount of traffic that was brought to a specific page by which channel. You can also rinse and repeat that process and look at it specific to your source medium. I would look at session source medium right here. That'll tell you which specific source, which specific medium has driven traffic to that page. And then the way that you're measuring your performance in the pages and screen section is typically by views. And views is just a shorter way of saying page views, as it was in Universal Analytics. But I can also see users. So if I have a user who's viewing the page multiple times, then I'm also going to get that frequency of how many views are happening per user, how often are folks engaged on the page, and then something that we'll get to here in a minute, of course, which is how many events are happening on the page. But I hope that kind of navigation review gives you a little bit more support whenever you're looking to find that page information. All right, and now we've got information about user details. So this is anything regarding user demographics, interest, age range. It could also be tech, what device they're on, what OS they're on, operating system, and it can also be information on return and new users. But before you can really dive in to enabling or to viewing your user details and demographics, you need to enable your user details. So I'm going to show you what that looks like in the back end here. And then I'll just make a quick note to say that if this is something you choose to do, I definitely recommend that you read through the terms and conditions. I've copied down a little blurb here from Google on what this means. And essentially, just to summarize it for you, when you're enabling your user details, you are enabling something called Google Signals. And Google Signals is how Google reads what other people are interested in, what their demographics are, basically by folks opting in to having ad personalization settings. So for example, I, for 5 years or 6 years or so, have searched tons of information on nonprofits during my time at Cause Inspired. I'm pretty convinced Google thinks I work for a nonprofit, although I don't, because Cause is for profit. But because of that, I do get a lot of nonprofit targeting, and that's because my ad personalization settings are turned on. So it takes the searches that I've had over the years, it takes my YouTube search history, all of that good stuff, and it tries to help and ensure that when I see an ad, it's something I'm going to be interested in. And let's go ahead and check out how you can enable that. So for this, you're going to want to go to the bottom left-hand corner in admin. Perfect. And we've got a lot of stuff that comes up here immediately. I believe, oops, wrong button. There we go. There we go, sorry. The next step after that is to select your data settings, and then you're going to go into data collection right here. And once you're in data collection, you've got about 4 different options, but the first one is up here at the top. It is Google Signals data collection. You're going to want to select this Get Started button right here, and it's going to pull you to a screen where you can go ahead and activate Google Signals. I've set up the account today to where we can activate Google Signals together, so you can see a little bit of the behind the scenes of what that looks like, so you feel comfortable there. It's going to give you this important blurb of information about reviewing your data sharing settings, and making sure that you are all up to date with your website, so that way you can go ahead and activate the Google Signals. Once you feel comfortable doing this with you and your team, you're going to go ahead and select Activate right there. Okay. And I know I kind of stalled a little bit at the beginning here, so let me just review that process one more time. You're going to go Admin, Data Settings, and then Data Collection. And once it's turned on, it's going to look like a toggle right here. It's really easy to get confused in this back admin area because there's a lot of words that start with data, because we've got data stream, data import, data settings. But when in doubt, it is the only one that has a drop down right here, if that helps you to remember. Okay, so now that you have enabled your Google Signals, you can start to access tons of information about the users that are going to your website with their consent, of course. And this is where we're going to dive into viewing user details. And this is kind of the second to last portion of reviewing navigation. So when you're viewing your user details, there's 3 categories that you can view. The first will be demographics. That includes where they're located, their gender, age, interests, and language. We can also look into their tech, so what platform they're searching on, their operating system, browser, and screen resolution. I'm a big fan of operating system and browser, specifically browser, because it helps me to understand if our audience might be more interested in Microsoft ads than they might be for Google ads. So you can grab a lot of info there. And then, of course, we're going to wrap it up with retention. Retention is kind of in a hidden area in GA4, but this is going to give you information on how many new users you're bringing into your website versus return users, what their engagement looks like, and then overall, how good of a job you've done to retain them over time. And then there you can see that there are a couple of graphs that I pulled. Okay, so to access this information, on the left-hand side, you're going to select Reports. And then it's going to pull up our life cycle section and our user section. And for this example, we're going to just start off with the users. We can see here that we've got our demographics area, so we can select overview in the demographics area, and that's going to pull up some initial information on basics for your audience, like age range, location, language, country. It does seem like it's taking a second here for me. Oh, it's loading. Well, once that pulls up, that's actually where I'm able to get a lot of the country-based information. There we go. Yeah, so it highlights a nice little map, as you can see here. And the darker the color is, it's basically where the majority of your users are physically located. So you can get an idea by country. You can also get an idea by city. If you scroll down, and once you've had your Google Signals enabled for some time, you'll also be able to get some more information here about your users by age and gender, all of that good stuff. For more details, you can click through on the demographic details section. And this is actually really fun to go in and play around with if you're looking to develop like personas on your audience, or if you're looking for a good remarketing opportunity or audience targeting opportunity on an ads platform, or simply if you need to report to somebody. So it's going to start off with country, but if you select this drop down here, you can actually dive a little bit deeper. So let's go ahead and take a look at city. Once the city loads here, it'll give you an idea of the city that a user is located in, and how many users are there that came to your site. Out of those users, how many were new, how many engaged sessions did they have, what was their overall engagement time. And just as an important note here, if you do ever want to share this with a stakeholder, with someone on your team, it's very easy to export GA4 data. All you're going to do is go in the top right-hand corner to share this report. It'll give you the option to download the file. You can download it as a PDF or as a CSV if you plan on making any charts or graphs with it. Next, we've got the text section, and this is, admittedly, this is probably what I do use more because we're really focused on platforms and where our users are at. So here we can see our users by browser, so important. I have a lot of folks that don't even use Chrome on a day-to-day basis to navigate, and I think it's really important that you see the difference between how many users are coming to your site from Chrome versus Safari and Firefox, because it can kind of give you an idea of where you really need to focus your performance and optimize your website for. So in this instance, because I see I've got a lot of users coming in through Chrome, I know that it's probably best that I focus my ad spend on Google Ads platforms, since they're definitely going to be favored on a browser like Chrome. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't get any traffic from different search engines. We can also see which search engine we're getting traffic through by deep diving our acquisition section. And we did that kind of at the beginning of the session, so I won't go through that again. But you can also see for operating system, if you do have like mobile traffic coming through or desktop traffic, which operating system they're coming from. This can give you a good idea of how to gear different ads that might be on mobile or for app stores from iOS or Android. And notice that all of these boxes that I'm going over, they all have users with a drop down under them, because you can actually alter what you're looking at here. So let's say I wanted to view users not users by browser, but I wanted to just see where my return users are coming from. I could go ahead and change that. I can also do the same for platform up here if I wanted to just focus on the return user aspect. And then finally, the kind of hidden area that I mentioned for user details is the retention section. And that is that little overview button at the bottom of Lifecycle. And I really like the retention overview because it takes into consideration data over a longer period of time based on your date range, but you can also alter it if needed. And it's going to let you know how good of a job you're doing retaining users on your website, which can be really difficult to do. It's also going to let you know the ebb and flow of your user engagement, if you've had a peak day of a bunch of comeback users, or if you've had a peak day of a bunch of brand new users to your site. So here at the top, we can kind of see we've got this progression of new users coming in, but if I wanted to switch it over to return users, Perhaps this follows like the cadence of us sending out a client newsletter, right? So we know when we send out a really good client newsletter that we're going to have folks come to our site that have been there before, and I can map that progress on a chart like this. And then down here at the bottom, I can kind of see something really similar, except with engagement. You know, what's the rate at which users are staying engaged on my site? I can see by the day of the month down here versus the minute of how long they stayed on site. So this would tell me really good information that on February 13th, you know, we had someone stay on the site for 16 minutes. And we can look back and see our acquisition for that specific day. Maybe you had a really good social post, and that's just going to help to inform you on what direction you should take with your social posting, paid ads, all of that good stuff. Okay. And then finally, I'm going to wrap it up with the admin section overview here. As I noted earlier, there have been a lot of changes to that, and it's going to be really important for the rest of our conversation. But I won't deep dive it again in this session. So in the admin section, as we saw earlier, when you went to enable your Google Signals, there's an option for user management in there. You can add users to your account through the property level or through the account level. There's also a section in there for data streams. You can select your data stream, so that way you can copy your measurement ID if you ever need to integrate with a third-party platform, or if you ever need to set up something in Google Tag Manager using your measurement ID, it can always be found there. And then, like I said, we'll be discussing today, this is also where the configure section was moved. So we have our events and our conversions in this area. And that's where you're going to be spending the majority of your time when it comes to creating new events and creating new conversions. We've also got specific data settings in here and product linking. All right. So let's go ahead and dive into events. And there's also going to be a lot of live navigation during this portion as well. But before we dive into that, I just want to do kind of some vocab here with you. And there's a lot of talk about events, and there's a lot of talk about conversions, but they are pretty different in GA4. So an event is just going to be measuring a recorded interaction on your website. And really, there are tons of built-in events. We'll go over those in detail here in a second. But a lot of the default ones that you get are page view, session start, user engagement you might get, scroll, click, first visit you might get. And these are just items that GA4 is identifying like, hey, this is a specific interaction that happened that could be interesting if you want to maximize it, or if you want to view its details, here's the beginning information. So great to know right off the bat. But it also kind of plays into this question of, you know, how do I know that users are interacting with my website? How do I know that they're engaged if I'm just seeing click? Like, what does click mean? And then further from there, how can I get to the details of what they're clicking on? What was the link text of what they clicked on? What was the outbound link that they actually selected? And that information is really important when it comes to creating conversions. So we're going to go ahead and deep dive those questions now. The answer to the first one, of course, is going to be in the engagement overview section, which we'll explore. And then the answer to the second one here is going to be surrounding custom definitions. Okay. So in the life cycle section, where we viewed acquisition and some of our user demographics, we have an engagement tab. And engagement is also where we saw our page view traffic. But right above it, there is an area in here for events that you can select. And this is going to show you all of the events that GA4 has built in, if you haven't expanded on these, that are running right now on your website. So just as you saw in my screenshot recently that I'm seeing page view here, I'm also seeing session start, user engagement, first visit, scroll, click, and view search results. I am going to broaden out my date range just a little bit here to like last 90 days, because I also want you to see that file download is another built-in event. And these are really important actions that I want to know more about. But if I were to click through on file download and open up this explore page here, really all it's going to tell me is the rate at which it happened, you know, over the course of how many days, how often is it happening. I have one real-time box here that is going to tell me parameter values. So it might tell me what file is being downloaded if it's happening in real time. Down here, I've got the event count by country, so I can see where the event is taking place. And then all the way down at the bottom here, I can see the file name custom parameters for events. So a bunch of interesting things that I can see. But let's go ahead and talk about the easiest way to get to the bottom of what files are being downloaded on my website. So similar to when we were looking at our page views earlier, you're going to want to single out this information before you can add on a secondary dimension. And the best way to single it out is just by typing in file download, and then you can hit enter. Hitting enter is going to single it out. You'll see how many times it was done. Now we're going to hit the blue plus sign, and you'll notice the first option at the top here when adding in a secondary dimension is custom. And in the custom section, I actually have a parameter built out for file name. When I select file name, it's going to give me the names of the files that were downloaded on my website. Perfect. But if you were to try to do this right now in your account and you hadn't already set this up, you'll notice that there's probably nothing in your custom section. And the reason why is because it does have to be added in. So you can go ahead and start adding in custom definitions by going to the admin section in the left-hand side here. And then going to the custom definitions section right there in the center property level. And then here, you've got the option to go ahead and start creating custom dimensions. And that's really what you're going to want to create with GA4. There is some thought behind which custom dimensions I'll recommend that you create today, but I will just kind of preface this by saying GA4 is a bit of an experimental analytics right now. So feel free to experiment. Don't hold yourself back by only creating 3 or 4. If you feel like you want to create, 10 or so, that's totally fine. More is not necessarily going to hurt you right now. So in the custom dimensions section, I can create a custom dimension by selecting that button. And then before I even name it, what I'm going to do is select event parameter down here. And this is going to give me a drop down of all the different event parameters that are occurring within GA4. And one of them that I mentioned earlier was with outbound link clicks is knowing what link URL a user clicks on when they outbound link click off of my website. I would love to know if I recommended they go to googlesupport.com, that they clicked the link that said Google Support. And so I'm going to select that event parameter and then write in dimension name. I'm going to type it in exactly how it is, link URL. The scope is still set to event. You can give it a description if you want. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Once I hit save on that, it's going to come up here as a dimension name. And then when I'm given some more time, I will be able to use it as a secondary dimension in my reporting. So let's go ahead and check that out. So I'm going to engagement. I'm going to events again. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here and search for file downloads. File download. Oh, date range. Awesome. And now I'm going to add on that secondary dimension right here under custom. And then file name still shows up, but I can also see link URL, which isn't as helpful for something like file download. It would probably be more helpful for something like click or outbound. So I'm going to go ahead and type in click. And I can go ahead and select link URL. The only problem with this is that I did just set it up though. So no information is going to come through right now for link URL. But I would say give this a day or two and you will see that data does come through. For today's examples, we'll be pretty much just using the file downloads. But there are a couple of other ways that you can grab your event parameters. And I want to explore those for something that might be a little easier like page view. So let's say you really want to know, you really want to make a conversion anytime someone goes to a specific page, or you want to view more information about the page view event. You can click through on that. And just as file download showed you earlier, it's going to be able to give you information here on what's happening in real time, events in the last 30 minutes. I can change my parameter here to something like page location, and that can tell me more specifically where we're seeing page views right now on the site. It might feel odd that this is structured like an event, but think about it how in Universal Analytics, you might have wanted to create like a destination goal for a thank you page. So that way you knew anytime someone filled out a form. This is really where you're doing the beginning findings of that information and where you can locate that parameter value. And if it's not completely connecting yet for conversions, that's a-okay, because we are about to talk about conversions right now. But I am going to take a brief pause and check the chat just to see if we do have any custom dimension specific questions. Okay. So I am going to take a quick step back because we've got a couple of good questions here. I did have someone ask earlier what a measurement ID is, and I do want to touch on that. So in the bottom left-hand corner in the admin section, you can always find your measurement ID by going to data streams, selecting the data stream that was set up for you, and finding it right here. A measurement ID is basically like your property ID. It's how you do the majority of your tracking with GA4. So when you are going to set up GA4 through Google Tag Manager and you want to set up a configuration tag, you would select GA4 and it's going to ask you what's your measurement ID. Let's say you are working on like HubSpot right now and you're using HubSpot to create landing pages and also as maybe like a CRM system. When you go to integrate HubSpot with your GA4, it's going to ask what your measurement ID is. So it's kind of just like the ID that helps you identify which account to send data to. I hope that helps out a little bit. And I think we've got one other question in here that I wanted to touch on that, yes, is specific to the custom dimensions. And that is this good question about link URL parameter. Specifically, what does it measure? Is it measuring off-site links? And the answer is yes, but it's measuring all links. So this is going to, if you have a link on your website that says learn more, and I believe we do, like I could give you an example. If you have a link on your website that says learn more, you can actually see that the link URL that was clicked on there. Yeah, let me see if we've got an example. So see which services can solve your problems. Notice when I'm hovering over this button right here in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen in like a blue box, it says the link that is hyperlinked to this button. That link URL counts, but to your point, even a link that is outbound off of our website will also count. And setting up that custom dimension for link URL is going to give you that information. So definitely very important. Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, and then I think that I've got, okay, I think that I've got just a couple more questions here, but I can answer them at the end. I do see that someone was having an issue with seeing my screen, so I do just want to confirm. Can everyone see my screen all right in GA4? Yep, okay, thank you. All right. So now let's go ahead and we're going to take this a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about conversions now. And this is where we're going to spend the rest of our time, and I'll try to have some time at the end where we can break for more questions. So conversions. First, let's go ahead and just talk about what a conversion is. Keep in mind, not everyone in the webinar right now is probably on the same level with experience from Universal Analytics. So there is going to be some difference in vocabulary between Universal Analytics and GA4. So at its very core, a conversion is when you measure an action on your website, an action that you would consider a goal, something that you want to see users complete. So for us, we've got a couple of forms on our website that we want potential clients to fill out. We would say that the conversion we're looking for is a form submission. We're looking for a form submission on our contact us page. That's our conversion. And with GA4, they do have some built-in events that can easily be toggled on as conversions. We'll go over those. But I would say some of the most common conversions that I see that I want users to complete are typically purchases, which is a built-in event, outbound link clicks. So we had that great question earlier of, does a link URL measure when a user clicks off of my website too? Yes, and that's actually a really common conversion. If you're recommending folks to a partner website or to a website that maybe is an extension of yours, an outbound link click can absolutely be a conversion. File downloads is a great conversion, especially for a lot of nonprofit folks that I work with that have brochures, PDFs, forms that can only be filled out by hand. And then finally, another good conversion here, just to get you thinking on this, would be like a sign up. So if you want a user to sign up for your newsletter, that's an excellent example of a conversion. Why should you care about conversions? I would say there's two reasons here, and it's a very valid question. The first is, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to single out your data in GA4. If you have a conversion set up, or if you have multiple conversions set up, you can actually use the monetization section and the engagement section to make your reporting a lot easier. So your team says, you just built out this landing page. How many signups are we actually getting? If you have it set up as a conversion, it's very easy to go to engagement, look at the conversions, export that data, and send it on. And then the second reason is definitely one that I'm more biased about, working in enterprise level account management with digital marketing, and that would just be for paid ads, specifically Google ads. Conversions integrate really, really nicely into Google ads and a lot of ad platforms, and they're going to give us information on if we're doing a good job at the end of the day. So maybe we drove 5,000 clicks to the page, but did anyone even download anything? Did anyone purchase anything? These are really important asks that we have to consider when we're creating ads, and what you should ask whenever you're creating ads as well. So those, I would say, are the two value points behind caring and creating about conversions. And then the last thing that I want to address here before we go on is that I'm going to say conversions probably a million times. And the reason why I'm saying conversions more often than goals is because goals don't exist anymore in GA4. So in Universal Analytics, you probably saw goals in your admin section. You maybe had your team report to you on specific goals, but they have completely changed that. So the vocabulary now is definitely conversions. But you can think about them synonymously because they do pretty much measure the same exact thing. Okay. And Max asked a really good question too about how can we send GA4 conversions to Google Ads, and I will absolutely show you at the end of the presentation, just as a note here. And if I forget to, anyone feel free to call me out on that, because that is something I'd love to show you. Okay. So let's talk about some types of conversions in GA4. There's 3 different types here. There are predefined conversions. These are the built-in events that you have, and they are automatically already marked as a conversion. You cannot unmark them. We'll go over which ones those are. They're really only applicable if you've got an app, and then the only one that's applicable for desktop would be purchase. We do also have the ability to mark an event as a conversion. So earlier when I was looking in the event section, you can see that there's the ability to toggle on an event that you like, that's solid, it's working well, and you can just say, hey, this is a conversion. So a good example of that is if you want every file download to count as a conversion, you can just toggle on that event as a conversion. We'll review that here in a second. And then finally, when it comes to custom conversions, you can create custom conversions, which is basically where you're going to take the event base and you're going to customize it further and say, okay, I want to track file downloads, but I specifically only want to track when a user downloads this file. Or maybe you might say, I want to track when a user reaches the thank you page on our website. So you'll do that by identifying the page view event and then adding in the parameter for page location contains thank you. And we're going to do all examples of that live. But before I dive into that, just so I can make sure we're all on the same page here, there are some predefined conversions that are built into GA4. If you have a GA4 connected to a mobile app right now, this is pretty applicable to you. We don't do a lot of mobile app targeting, so I will admit it's not something I'm very technically savvy on. But I do know the basics, and the basics is that it's going to tell you when a user first opens your app, when they subscribe in the App Store, when they renew a subscription, when they purchase anything in your app, and then that's about it for built-in conversions for apps. And then finally, if you have a regular website just on your desktop and you are using GA4 to measure that performance, one built-in conversion that will always be in there is the purchase conversion. Now, this is not automatically linked to your e-commerce. You do have to work with whoever is optimizing or I would say in charge of your e-commerce system, that third-party organization, and they will typically have an integration they can set up for you. But this event itself is built into GA4. So sometimes it might automatically start tracking, which is awesome. And you can see here, I've highlighted what it looks like. It's all lowercase, one word, just says purchased. And just as a note here, you cannot turn these on or off as conversions. They are built in and predefined, and you'll always be able to view them in the monetization section of GA4. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how to mark an event as a conversion. When it comes to marking an event as a conversion, the first thing that you have to do, of course, is have an event that you're interested in. So previously, this would have been in the Configure tab here on the left-hand side. That has since been updated. So now this is going to be in the admin section, the bottom left-hand corner here. We're going to go to events, just as we did earlier, and we're going to see a lot of good events coming through here. So we're seeing clicks, first visit, page view scrolls, session start, view search results. So let's say there's a really big goal for your team this year to drive tons of new sessions to your site. And that's something that you want to count as a conversion, and it's something that you want to measure the performance of solely on its own. You can simply toggle this section on, and it will go ahead and mark that as a conversion. It's really as easy as that. These are built-in events, so I didn't customize these. Toggling it on gives you the ability to view it in the conversion section over here in the left-hand side. So I can see that the conversion session start is already imported in here. I can also go to my report section now that I've toggled that on, and I can go to the engagement and then conversions, and I can view specific conversion data for the session start conversion once I've got some data coming in on it. I also mentioned earlier that toggling on those conversions does give you the ability to import this into Google Ads. And I mentioned that in the admin section, you can do product linking in here. So when you link a product specifically, you can choose the option for Google Ad links. You can select this and then choose your Google Ads account. Once you do that, your accounts will be integrated. And when you go into Google Ads, you'll have the option to import those conversions as well. So it may feel like a really small step, just toggling something on to mark it as a conversion, but it's really big and important to do in your GA4 because it gives you the ability to see it in multiple places, to import it to your Google Ads and all of that good stuff. But we do want to take it a step further because when it comes to just toggling on these built-ins, like not a lot of them are very helpful for what you're going to want to see. You're probably going to want something with a bit more detail. And that's when it's going to get into creating custom events that you can mark as a conversion. So this is a recorded session, as I noted earlier. This is a great opportunity if you're watching the recording to pause and you want a written guide. I am going to do this live, but essentially what we're going to do is we're going to create a thank you page conversion for anyone who reaches a thank you page on our website. And I'm going to show you how to do that using the page view standard event. Okay. So here I can see that I've got the page view event in my event section. And because I'm a little old school, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the tab here. It just helps me. My computer's not the fastest. So it's nice to have all the information that you need in one tab. And then in the other tab, you can use that for exploring. So in my second tab, I'm going to go to reports, and then I'm going to pull up the engagement section. I'm going to go to events. And once I'm in events, I'm going to scroll down to page view. And here I'm going to see a lot of the information that we were looking at earlier. Specifically, I can see the page path section here, which pages my users are going to. I can also see what's happening in real time. If I change this to something like page location, I can see what pages folks are on right now in real time. But I'm going to be using this page path section here on the right. And hovering over this, I can see that we've got some folks on like our agreement page, strategic partnerships page. I can change the filter here to include a different platform if I wanted to, or I can change this to work off of a different page option. I can do page title or page path. So this is a great way to investigate what are you looking to track here. For our example, I'm going to say, I found a page that says thank you in the URL, and that's what I want to track. So I'm going back to the events section, and now I'm going to select create an event. When you pull that up, you'll have the option to create here in the top right-hand corner. And the first thing it's going to ask you to do is to name your event. The only caveat to naming events in GA4 is that they always have to have underscores. If it does not have an underscore, it's not going to work. So let's say I'm going to do thank _you page view. So I'm tracking a thank you page view. I will now say that the parameter event name equals page view. And if you're ever wondering like, well, why did you pull up two tabs, or how did you know that page view was your value? Well, that's the answer. So I have my second tab pulled up to always remind me what my formula is. The event that I'm looking at here is page view because that's what I want to track. If I was making a file download goal, which I'll do here in a second, you'll see that I can also pull up my second tab just to remember. And I want to remember exactly how it's spelled, exactly where the underscores are. The next thing I'm going to do is add a condition here. And this is going to give me the opportunity to add in another parameter. When I select parameter, it gives me all of the built-in options, including something that you might have used to create a custom dimension earlier. I'm going to scroll down until I find page location, and then I'm going to change my operator from equals to contains, because I want to track this as a goal if a user reaches any page on my site that says thank you in it. And I'm just going to say the value is thank, because I know when I have a page on my site that has the word thank in it, that's going to work for this. Now, alternatively, you might have a page that says thank-you. That's perfect. Maybe it's got a backslash forward and back here. That's also great as well. You might know the URL perfectly. You can copy and paste that in, and you can change your operator to equals. There's really not a lot of wrong ways to do it. You just want to get the gist of how do I identify to GA4 that this event is going to fire when a user reaches the thank you page. Now we're going to go ahead and create. Once I've created that event, you'll notice it's not automatically going to be set up in here. A user has to complete it before it's going to show up in your event section. But there is a way to fast track this as a conversion if you know that you want this to be a conversion. And the way is by, you can copy this here, the name of your custom event. This might be easier to do like this, Control-C. And then you're going to go to the conversion section here, select new conversion event, and go ahead and paste that in there and save. And as long as it is exactly how you had it in the event section, it's going to work perfectly fine. Okay. So that is just a quick breakdown of this section here for marking an event as a conversion. To kind of wrap up this thought process here, I want to talk about how you can plan out a good conversion inside of GA4. We'll finish off with creating a file download conversion together, and then we'll wrap up with any questions that you might have. So feel free to start putting those in the chat if you haven't already. But for the process here, when you're looking at making a custom conversion, what I want you to do is first decide what it is that you want to track. So let's say it's a specific file or form that you have on your site. go ahead and decide what you want to track, but keep in mind the event data that you have coming through. For something like a form submission, that might take a little bit of extra time because you'll need to use Tag Manager to create an event that can be tracking a form submission. Form submission is not something that's built into GA4 for everyone. So think about what you can do within the scope of the data that you have. After that, you're going to note the name of the event. You can write it down. You can copy and paste it, just as I kind of did with having the multiple tabs. That also works as well. After that, you're going to want to create a custom dimension. And the custom dimension is just going to help you define the event further. So let's say you do want to track a file download, then that means today you should go into your GA4 and create a custom dimension for file name. So that way you can see the details of the file downloads that you want to track. After that, you can go ahead and create an event, give it an event name. So now you're going to select the file download event, you'll make it. And then once you're done with that, and you see that it's coming through, mark it as a conversion. And then once it's marked as a conversion, you're done. That is the process here. It sounds a little bit more complicated than it is, or maybe vice versa for you. That's totally fair. But let's go ahead and explore this one more time, but this time we'll do something a little bit more complicated than a page view. We can do something like file download. So I will go here to last 90 days so I can find my file download, and I see it right here. Instead of clicking through on it, I'm just going to pull it up in the search bar. I've got it singled out. So now I'm going to add on my secondary dimension, custom file name. And let's say I want to make sure that it is a conversion anytime someone downloads this business marketing solutions file that we have on our site. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the name, copy that file name, just like that, Control C. In my other tab, I'm going back to analytics and I'm going back to the event section. In the event section, I'm going to go ahead and create a new event, create. And the name of this event is going to be specific to the file that you're downloading. Since it is pretty specific, I'll call it marketing solutions, marketing_solutions download PDF. The event name equals file download right there under the event name section. You're going to spell it exactly how it is. Add on that condition so you can further define it. The parameter here, let's take a look back. The parameter is file name. Remember, you're adding that in from your custom dimension right there. So we're going to search in parameters until we find file name. And if you don't see it right off the bat, you can just type it in, file_name. And then the operator is going to equal. It looks like my copy didn't work. Let's try one more time. There we go. The file name is going to equal the value, which is right there as written in the event section. You'll go ahead and create it at this point. And then now you've added a new event. Remember, if you want to mark it as a conversion right away, you're just going to copy that name just like that. Go into your conversion section, create new conversion event, paste it right in, and save. All right. So that sums up a bit of what we had to go over for today. Thank you all for attending. I know we only have about 2 minutes left, but as I said earlier, I'm more than happy to stay on a bit longer if we've got questions. I'm going to start by going through the chat from top to bottom. And if this is the point where you head out, I just want to say thank you for joining. I appreciate your attention and expect a recording of this session to be emailed out to you shortly. Thank you. Happy Friday. And now I'm going to go ahead and start from the top and answer some questions. I'm going to go back to home here. And I'm also going to pause the recording.